now.
There it is. Welcome to another episode of Worship and Word Conversations. Our Saturday afternoon, we hang out in this space. We put our feet up. We kick our shoes off. Most of us are not wearing shoes anyway. And this is the space where we take our personal spirituality and faith and we make it super, super, super practical. That's important. So just the space where we hang out and do that. And Chris, over the last several weeks, man, we've been having such a great time over the course of the weekends, man. So how you feeling today?
Feeling great. I'm just thinking a year ago,
Ooh.
like just where we were
Yeah.
with Worship and Word, and just where we are now. I can't even say post-pandemic.
Yeah.
But I'm feeling great, especially because we got some guests that's coming home.
Yeah, the green room, the virtual green room is on fire.
Yes, it's stacked back there.
Familiar faces, first time faces here with us on Worship and Word and our conversations about church and entrepreneurship. So we are definitely going there. No punches will be pulled. It's gonna be a great conversation. Be great. They already starting trouble in the private chat that nobody else can read. So you already know it's going down today. Aaron checking in with us, Cerise checking in with us. Way to work on closing those rings today, Cerise. Way to work on closing those rings today. Shout out to you for that. And anybody else who wants to close rings with us at the Worship and Word family with Chris and I want to get that workout in and get that accountability, let us know. Hit us up on Facebook. You can send us a message, and we'll join the ring closing party.
Yeah, hashtag Lord of the Rings. So yeah, just go ahead and I think they got you people. They don't got me yet. So yeah. Y'all need to connect with me as well.
Check the DM. Yeah.
Oh, the Worship and Word DM.
Okay. Or DM.
I'll go ahead and do that. I don't get pings. with that. So yeah. I checked it out.
One of our guests has started trouble already in the private chat.
Hey,
yeah.
Hey, you ain't retracted nothing.
Listen, so last night, if you were hanging out with us last night, and Gerald was with us last night, what's up, Gerald?
Yeah.
If you were hanging out with us last night, we were talking about incomplete faith. Right, that whole thing about incomplete faith. We were looking at Mark chapter 11. We were looking at the fig tree, the cleansing of the temple. When Jesus says, if you got faith, you'll be able to say to a mountain, like, get up and move, and that thing will be done. And what I realized, Chris, as we were coming down to the end of our conversation, is that for so many of us, that next step of faith, entrepreneurship is connected to that. For some of us, not for all of us, but for some of us, that step of starting an enterprise taking the financial risk is a part of our faith journey. And some of us we haven't gone there yet. We've dabbled with it. We've downloaded a book. We've taken a course. We've done all the preliminary things, but we haven't really dove in. And in that area, we've been like the fig tree. We've been showing all these leaves, all these promise, all this potential, but there's no fruit. So we're going to talk about it today.
I'm here for it.
Talk about it today. We got Brooklyn, New York in the building. Well, really Maryland, but Hazel is checking in. Happy Sabbath from Brooklyn, New York. Pam is with us. OG Carlos is hanging out with us.
Carlos is in the building.
He said, Chris, you looking different.
You know what it is too? My glasses. That's what it is. OG. Yeah. The lack of spectacles accentuates the lineup.
Okay. Yeah, okay. And Carlos said he wants to check your barber, so you can throw your barber's hashtag in there.
Hey, he got a new app now too. Hey, he going legit.
Your barber's app?
Hey, listen. So yeah. He does house calls.
Okay, man. Does he do house calls all the way to Boston? Because that's where Carlos is.
He might. Real talk.
Okay.
Robert had previously, he did, and then he never came back because I guess it was just so good. So good. So, just saying.
Yeah.
It's a pattern.
Carmilla checking in with us as well. Yeah. Okay. So as we begin to have this conversation, I know our guests in the green room are itching to get on with us. We told we bring them on about 4 or 5 minutes in, and we're about to do that for this discussion. But I want to know, before we bring them on, how many of our Worship and Word family, how many of you are entrepreneurs? I want to know, how many of you own your own business, run your own business, or if you used to, or even if you're related to somebody, and we're not talking about like second or third cousin down down the road, it's like close, they like up close to you. So how many of us, drop it in the chat, let us know you own your own business, or you used to, or you're closely related to someone who owns a business, because our conversation today is about church and about entrepreneurship and the connectivity of it, the tensions, some of the awesome stories, some of the tragic stories, and even some of the opportunities that are available for us that maybe we haven't taken advantage of. And I know this conversation today is going to be amazing. So you might as well just go ahead and hit that share button right now.
I mean, let's just pull off the Band-Aid right now. Is church inherently an entrepreneurial initiative?
Oh, see, you going there. You go. Oh,
I would take my mic and drop it, but I need it. So
yeah. Pick it back up. So here we go. What we got? We got Carlise and I both have businesses. All right. We got Hazel McDonald, 2 businesses. We got Pam Horn, all about kids daycare. Yeah. So okay. So yeah, let's just jump into it.
By the way, that warms my heart. Either way.
Yeah, we got business.
So we got serial entrepreneurs here, like 1, 2+ like this is So we're in good company today.
We definitely going there today, man. Let's start with who you want to start with? Like,
I don't know. I thought you were just gonna bring all of those. We just gonna trickle. We're gonna trickle them in.
I don't know how you feel. Trickle or all of them?
Let's just throw them all in.
Throw them all.
Yeah, throw them all.
Throw them all like this guy.
Yep.
People say before, and this guy. People say before, and this preacher, our first time here with us. Boom, boom. Church entrepreneurship, y'all. Welcome to Worship and Word Conversations.
Hello. Thank you.
What's up? What's going on, guys?
So this is something that I should probably do because our background is a little different. I'm gonna go ahead and like click this little button. Boom.
Oh, okay.
You get some names going on in this conversation. Who is having a worship concert? I just want.
They are. Who it is? It ain't me.
It's a worship.
You hearing my daughter singing in the background?
Oh, that's
yeah. My daughter. I need to switch my mic, so I'm using the shotgun. So that's her thing. Like every Saturday, I bought her one of those JBL Flip Bluetooth speakers, and so she gets this point where she's like, listen, I'm just gonna blast and sing, and so
that's what's up.
Yeah. So I'm gonna switch mics then. Otherwise, you guys are gonna be blessed the entire time.
Hey, a couple weeks ago,
tell them, Chris.
We had a graduation party down the street, and it wasn't just gospel music they were playing. So
it was a Saturday afternoon. So we got like, what do we get? Like, it was a mix. Like
it was a mixture.
Cheese 1 minute.
Yeah,
it
was all kosher though. It was all kosher, but still, yeah.
You got to be careful. You got to be careful out there in Miami. You never know what you are going to get. So RK3 is switching it up, getting a new microphone. Let's do a little round robin. Let's do the introduction. We got Pastor Novella D. Smith with us. Hey. Pastor Novella, if you could just give us just like a 30-second overview of the context of your ministry and also the context of your business.
Sure. I am the associate at Metropolitan in Hydesville, Maryland. And my business is Deep Style Automotive Detailing, where I specialize in interior detailing.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Yeah, you can go ahead if you got a website. You can drop that in the private chat, and I will bring it into the main comment so everybody could get that as well. All right. So RK3, you good now?
I think we're rocking, Doc. How you doing?
I'm good, man. So talk to us a little bit, man. Tell us about your context and why this particular topic is important to you. Not being a pastor. Definitely got some preacher some context.
Yeah. Well, my context is that I am a 4-time entrepreneur. I started my first business in 2001. While I was teaching, I was a full-time teacher, taught high school biology and physics at the time. I started a business online where I was doing gospel music promotion. And then I started a web design firm after that. And then we moved into an online e-learning development. And then after that, moved into the training industry. So I've been in the entrepreneurship, the business building space for almost 20 years now, man. And so it's something that I'm passionate about. I didn't even know that I was going to be in it, but I ended up here. I just knew that I wasn't supposed to be working for anybody else. So that's my life. As far as the pastoral end of things, I'm a PK, and so I've seen firsthand all of the different things that have to do with pastors and what is taboo in from at the conference level, so with regard to entrepreneurship and other stuff. So that's me, man.
Yo, can you tell me what button to push on my Rodecaster so I can get that bass? That's all I'm trying to figure out right now. You drop it. Quiet storm bass.
Quiet storm bass. You don't want quiet storm bass.
This guy, good friend of ours, Dr. David Defoe. Talk to us, man. Just give us your context and what entrepreneurship looks like for you.
Do I sound like RK3? You know my voice and stuff. Hey, everybody. David Defoe. My context. Well, I work for Allegheny East. I'm the relationship ministries director. But as far as an entrepreneurship is concerned, I have a mental health group practice, which over the last couple of years has grown. And so, yeah, I guess that's what I do. I also have a nonprofit that is getting off the ground. So yeah. So I guess that's why I'm here.
All right.
I love like the
humble, the faux humble. Defoe,
yeah.
Defoe, F-A.
Listen,
yeah.
Humility.
What else you want me to say, man? I mean,
like the social media. Oh, you said like growing. Can you, because you put it, once you put it on the social media, it's there for the world to see. All right. So can you give us the context of growth? What that looks
like? So you all are storytellers. We have the Storytellers Growth Lab person here. We have the storyteller. So there's a story behind it. So as the context of this conversation unfolds, then the story will reveal itself. You can't give it all. Otherwise, I'll have nothing else to say, man. So I got to hold the story.
Pierre, just go ahead and switch. Make him the host. He done.
The storytellers are on, man. I can't give the ending before we've done the build up, man. Come on.
That's right.
He just there it is, y'all. Ladies and gentlemen,
send me a mic for that shout out, Rob. Okay, yeah, send me a mic.
Yeah, I think I have a spare one sitting around at the top. Yeah, sure, we got you.
All right, so let's dive in and wrestle, with this topic, church and entrepreneurship. For you, man, so many questions I want to ask you. I want to hear this first. What's the faith story behind you deciding to start a business? What's the faith? What's the faith story behind that? Pastor Novella, start us off. What's the faith?
Okay, cool. So back in the day, like in undergrad, a friend, I used to clean her cymbals for a little bit of money. And then she had a Jeep, and her Jeep was a hot mess. And she was like, man, my car is so dirty. I wish someone would clean it. And I was like, I'll clean it. No big deal. I'm thinking, you clean cymbals, why not? It's easy to clean a car too, right? And so somehow from that moment, I just started detailing cars. And it has grown in desire. So at first, it just started off to make a little bit of money every now and again. And now it's turned into a business where I also get to mentor youth. So I'm starting a class next weekend where I'm teaching youth about interior detailing and showing them the ropes of it and the business side and the ethics and visiting detail shops and those kind of things. And so I guess the faith story just deals with, it just started out as some kind of a simple way to make a few dollars. And now it's turned into an entire business where I get to mentor others.
What's crazy about this? I'm thinking about growing up, and I would have loved for someone in my church, an entrepreneur in my church, a business owner in my church, to say, hey, this is kind of how you do what I do, and I want to teach you some of the ropes and the ins and outs and the finances and the ethics and all of that. But that was, I don't know, anybody, did you have people in your church growing up like Pastor Novella who were willing to show you some things entrepreneurially?
I didn't. My thought process about what business was as a kid was very different. I mean, people that were in my church that owned a like mechanic shop or drove taxis or had different business. My thought process around entrepreneurship was retail. It had to be something retail, like a shop or store related. So that was my only context. And to be quite frank, these people were never built up in our church as people who you needed to aspire towards. It was like the people that didn't get to go to college that ended up doing something. And that is, that's one of the most damaging things that you can share and really promote. I mean, and I get it that's where we were as a community, right? We thought that education was the absolute only way through stuff. And so we poo-pooed everything else. Right. And so, this conversation, I wish some of the people that were in my church that when I was a kid were listening to this conversation right now, because I think we led some kids astray because of the way we talked about business and education.
Oh man, go ahead.
See, too often we associate business with money as opposed to business with service. And so because we have that misassociation or that misappropriation of connection, right? We tend to think that those people who make money are somehow, are other than, right? So in my context growing up, I grew up broke, blessed, but still broke. My mother was a single mother. And so the concept of entrepreneurship or starting a business, I was like, it was, what do I have in my hand that I can sell you? How can we make this transactional, as opposed to thinking, well, how can I develop something where I can provide a service to someone and then allow myself to get or generate income based off that service that I give? It was always, and of course, when you're a product of a single parent household, you learn how to hustle real good. So you learn how to chase down a dollar. You learn how to make a dollar. But to put it together and to sort of enterprise it. I think there's a text in Proverbs that says something about someone who makes fast money, they lose it real quickly or something like that. But the person who gains it over a period of time, they keep it. That's the mindset that then had to change. For me, it was always about, okay, how do I change my mindset to stop chasing a dollar and chase service, chase why I'm doing this, as opposed to me just trying to, add money to the bank account or just survive from in between check to check, Yeah. But no, it wasn't something the church talked about. The church talked about the love of money being the root of all evil, but they left the love part out. And they just talked about, if you have money, we want it in the offering plate, but okay, all right.
So you know what?
Because I still get paid by the offering. So
so Pierre, I want to throw something in there, Pierre, and then I'll leave it alone. We were fearful of entrepreneurship so much so that growing up, we always talked about the Proverbs 31 woman being a virtuous woman, and we left out the part that she was an entrepreneur, she was a businesswoman, and she was literally a boss.
Yeah.
She ain't need a man.
Nope.
Because then how does that fit what Paul says? That doesn't fit what Paul says. Paul says, never mind.
Yeah.
Right.
Hey, listen, but if you're going to go that route, though, even the parable of the talents, the master, the hard tasking master, was an entrepreneur. He says, I see that you reap where you don't even sow. That sounds entrepreneurial to me, even though he used that as an excuse. I mean, he even said, listen, you could have just you could have gained passive income by just giving it to somebody else and accrue some sort of interest in it, So I think that begs the question, is our master an entrepreneur? Answer, yes, he is. So if our master is the entrepreneur, then he must have established not an institution, but a startup. See, we playing around with this thing, right? Because when the early church began, when the early church began, it was so decentralized and it scaled to the point that it did because it wasn't, there was no hierarchical structure that made it into this institution that startups eventually become. And this is where we mess up. And this is why we turn something that was spiritual into something that's secular, which follows the secular path. So most startups, Uber is a part of this, Netflix is a part of this, or will become a part of it. The bigger they come, the harder it is for them to innovate. They have more departments now, they've got more structure now, and they even maybe over structure. So then you got another startup that comes in and just disrupts the entire thing. So I just want y'all, I'm just putting y'all on notice right now, because how structured and institutionalized the Christian faith is right now, there will be another startup. All right. So in other news, my church, they didn't hide. Yeah, I'm just gonna let that simmer for a little bit. They didn't hide or avoid the question of business. I think it was specialized. And so it was almost as if they didn't take the time, which I wish they would have. I think we started to do it at our age, where we started to talk to the younger people, like me, even talking about it. But it was almost as if you're not a doctor, or if you aren't, I think the other side may be a restaurateur. It's either food or medicine.
Restaurateur.
Listen, because we have some of them in our church, right? So, but it was almost as if it was so specialized, and I guess it was as if it was the norm, that it's not that they didn't want to talk about it or money wasn't the root of all evil. It was just, it didn't occur to them that we could do that too.
So I think I grew up a little different than what you all are talking. Because at first I was like, did I learn about entrepreneurship growing up? And it's not until Chris mentioned food that I realized you've been seeing entrepreneurship since day one.
Absolutely.
Listen, my family is West Indian. It's the majority of my churches too. And it's when Chris said food, I was like, I've been seeing entrepreneurship.
Yep.
Listen, whenever there's a bake sale, there's entrepreneurship, because you know that specific lady or guy makes the best this, that, or the third. And you knew you could go to them for this. And when something was being catered, you knew you could go to this family because they can make the best whatever, X amount of dollars per pan. You had half foil pan, you had large foil pan, and it was X amount of dollars for this. I mean, I remember one of the guys having a food truck growing up. A food truck. Now you turn on the TV, you have Food Truck Nation on the Food Network. Back then, we had a guy with a food truck from the church. He could be on TV right now. We saw entrepreneurship, even though it wasn't called entrepreneurship. We saw that you could take your gift of cooking and turn that into food. It was $10 Fridays. $10 Fridays was, you can turn up to this person's house and you could buy a box of food. It was curry chicken, or they were doing brown stew, whatever, for $10. And there was your entrepreneurship. So what it did was it taught us what is your gift that you have and how much can you sell. And I learned about it, just not with the word entrepreneurship, I think.
So I think, Novella, though, the question inside of that, though, is not so much did we see it, but was it celebrated? I don't remember. We have things in church. Yeah, we've seen it, but I don't remember them having a business day in church. No. I don't remember them having a day where they celebrated they celebrated education. They had the education day. The people who graduated with their doctorates, their masters, their bachelor, they marched down the aisle. They did all these different things. They celebrated the doctors. They had health day. The nurses and the doctors were up there. Was there ever a day where the people who created something from nothing were stood up and as children, were we pointed to them to say, hey, you too can do this?
Only after you get your doctorate. And that's the problem. You have to go through the education track in order to be the business person,
right? Which
was the challenge. And here's the thing. Before I know, Defoe, you're gonna chime in after this. There's a gap. Which makes our entrepreneurship stunted in the church, which is why it's not even considered entrepreneurship as much as it is freelancing. And that's a hard lesson that I had to learn too, before actually getting into a startup incubator, realizing I've been freelancing my whole life because I didn't have one or two components that actually makes entrepreneurship, which is scalability. The problem is somehow we have found a way to scale out churches. And that's even the way we do that is kind of jacked. But to scale out churches, but we haven't found a way to even scale out the small cooking events or things that we've had to the point where it could even match or should even match the amount of churches that we have right now. And I don't think it's intentional, but for whatever reason, and Vel, you can speak to this as well, it was just a local event. It was just in the parking lot. And for whatever, hey, David, chime in, because I know, but there's a gap, and we don't have true entrepreneurship because we haven't learned how to, and that's a biblical concept, scalability, like building the thing out. But for whatever reason, we keep it in a hub, we keep it internally. So whatever money that I make, I'm able to, it doesn't circulate outside of the arena of the immediate church community. And that's where we mess up. And I think that's how come we're failing as far as discipleship as well, because we even think of business as a entrepreneurship model when it's really just freelancing.
So a little bit of what I was about to say was the intent is very important, right? So are we doing what we're doing to survive, or are we doing it to thrive? It's the difference. Is entrepreneurship what we do in order to survive? No, that's called hustling. That's called survival, right? Is entrepreneurship something that I do? So let me just be honest. I'll be open and honest. When I started my practice not necessarily for survival. I had a job, but it was a hustle. Right, Pierre, you know this very well. We've talked about it many a times. My when I started my practice at first, it was a hustle, and it wasn't until about 2 years ago that it moved from being a hustle to being a business, something that I did to survive and add a little extra to something that I was now doing to thrive, to build legacy, to put, so there's a big difference between what we do and what we encounter, especially in the religious space. For some people, it's just, we're doing the bake sales because we're raising money for an event. Well, is that, or I'm raising money so my kid can go to school. We have to make sure that we, that when we talk about entrepreneurship, that we talk about it in the right proper framework and context. It has to be about not only serving and reaching ourselves for the fulfillment of ourselves, but it has to extend beyond that. It's not the laborer that just deserves his wages in entrepreneurship. It's those that labor for me that I provide wages for. That has to also be, that has to be extended as we talk about entrepreneurship.
Yeah, that's good. It's easier to manage food. It's more difficult to manage people, or it's easier to manage the products that we can deliver, but it's so difficult to actually trust or entrust and to teach. That's what come I love what you're doing is you're not just, doing detailing. When you hit the mentorship piece, that's scalability right there, and that's what we're missing in a lot of our models, even the people that we might have looked up to at our church. Being a doctor, inherently is not scalable. For some reason, we thought that getting an education was that's not scalable. I mean, it's definitely something that you should aspire to do. But the challenge now is I can, for maybe $400, go to Google's university because, they have opened up a whole lot of online courses for chump change compared to actually going to a university to get like a master's in human interaction design. And after enrolling in this course, Google will then hire me after enrolling in a few of their courses, if not just one of their courses that's under $500, hire me to be a developer, hire me to be a designer, and start off with like $90K.
Yeah. Can I?
The model is shifting.
I know you're the host, Pierre, but I want to ask a question.
It's round robin.
So is there a racial, ethnic, community, cultural piece to this, right?
Let's go.
Because, I was telling you what I didn't see growing up, and I grew up in, as a PK, we went from church to church, but the truth is we were in predominantly West Indian, African American churches growing up. I went to college, and when I went to college, my college was fairly mixed when I got there, and I had people that had different experiences than I did. Now, one of the brilliant things that my dad did, and I had no idea what he was doing, different than a lot of my other friends. When I was about 14 years old, he sent me to work at my first job at a construction company. And this construction company was owned by a friend of his. I worked at that construction company for 2 summers. And then I worked at another pharmacy with a clinic next door. And that pharmacy and clinic were owned by a friend of my dad, right? I don't know of any of my friends who grew up in circumstances where they went to work for another business owner who looked like them. But when I was in college, I knew a lot of people who did that, right? There was a business owner in the church. There was an entrepreneur in the church, in the community or whatever, and they had the chance to intern or go work with them. And so they saw a different model of what could be, rather than just, oh, you've got to get your education. You got to go through. And even if you get a bachelor's, you got to go all the way through doctorate, because that's the only way that we survive.
You know, that is something that was coming to my mind as I was just thinking about what happens at church. And even though it may not have been done in a class session form, it was presented in a certain way somehow. A lot of the young people intern with the physicians or the lawyers at the church. Yeah. And then a lot of them, this one guy at our church was learning from one of the mechanics at our church, how to do different things. One of our sound engineers learns from another guy who has his own sound engineer lighting company. And that's the interest field he has. But it was because he came to church. And it was made available and provided. And so now his head is focused in doing that for a career. But it was because there was an opportunity presented at the church. So even though it wasn't like sit down, like I'm going to do, sit down and let me show you step 1, step 2, A, B, and C, from the business side to the hands-on side, there was the opportunity to be ingrained, just like Rob is saying.
I want to ask about the cultural framework relative to pastors. When we look at even the racial, even disparity is the word. Well, as we look at the African American West Indian context and what is suitable or comfortable or acceptable for a pastor to do in addition to his or her income, and then in other ethnic communities outside of African American and West Indian culture, what's acceptable for a pastor to do as it relates to his or her income. And I came across an individual maybe about 10 years ago. This guy's white guy, church pastor for a number of years, and then he became an administrator in a let's say independent ministry. Let's put it that way. He became a senior administrator in independent ministry. And we were having a conversation as I was getting ready to go on this television show. And he said, yeah, I've been in construction for 30 years. I've been in construction all through when I've pastored 2 or 3 churches, when I pastored one church, and now even as an executive for this ministry, I'm about to sell my construction business. And how do we wrestle with what we find to be acceptable? And I'll start with you, Pastor Novella. Is there any pushback when you say, okay, yes, I'm a pastor and I have this enterprise that I'm going to work in? Is the West Indian context of your church, was it embracing of it? Or did you find pushback to say, why, or you can't do that, or non-compete clause, or whatever that comes out when we talk about pastors and limitations or expectations?
Sure. So let's begin with the cultural side. The cultural side, absolutely thrilled. We can't believe you do this. This is so awesome. Can you come do my car? Wow, wow, wow. Because the West Indian culture is use your gifts. Whatever they are, you maximize what you do. So it was a very thrilling thing culturally. When it comes to the no compete clause, if anyone ever asks me about it on that particular higher level, my answer is going to be this. Some people go to the gym for 2 hours out of a day in order to relax their mind and get their body in order. I detail a vehicle. That is my answer, if anybody were to ask me. And it is the truth. When I'm outside, I'm enjoying. When I am turning over a car and making it look better than some people received it when they purchased it, that is very satisfying. That is what some people do on the elliptical. So if I was asked, that would be my response. And I'm always accessible. So it's not that it's taking away from my job.
I love that. Yeah, that's so, you know, I got a question, because now that we're talking about, you know, managing, well, it's not necessarily managing, but where does it fit? Where do we fit into what we're good at doing, you know, our gifting, and then how we use that to de-stress versus, you know, using that to generate income, using that to, is there some sort of interplay there? And the only reason why I'm asking is because you just kind of brought up a thought to me, Novella, thinking about, hey, listen, certain people do this when it comes, you know, to just relaxing or clearing their minds. Is there overlap or any sort of overdoing this? Yep, I just said that. Where the very thing that you use to build or to, you know, to help or even to minister, you also use to de-stress. Is there any kind of, or is it, listen, if it works for you, it works for you, and that's it? Y'all throw that out there, because I think that I might be in that boat too, where there's just some things that I'm really good at doing, and I realize that I will still even do those things, even though it can technically be considered work. And so now I'm wondering, am I breaching the work-life balance if I'm comfortable being in that space and doing that, even if it's helping me to decompress?
Yeah. Pastor Novella, I'm disappointed in us that you have to answer or you have to respond that way. No fault of yours. That's what our culture has built. And I'm disappointed that we are that way, because I mean, I when I was a kid, I heard words from the mouths of pastors and administrators that intimated that if a pastor had another gig or was doing something else in addition to pastoring, they were not really committed to the ministry. Right. And here's the thing. I'm like, listen, if you have a business, you are in a position to meet people.
Come on.
People outside your church that you can minister to. As a matter of fact, I mean, people, we don't want to talk about the disciples. I mean, they weren't necessarily full-fledged paid pastors, but they still had their stuff. They were still fishermen, right? Paul still made tents. Yeah, so I mean, we don't want to have these real conversations about, you know, why is it that we feel that entrepreneurship and business cannot live alongside? And I don't even want to say alongside. Why can it not be subsumed into ministry? Why can they not be one and the same?
Yes, I believe the concern that people have with that is that the pastor will be so consumed with their business or their second job or whatever, that they are not available to pastor or to minister or whatever. That is not the case with me. I organize myself in a way that I am just available. So if somebody calls me on emergency, I have no problem with telling a client, listen, I will come back tomorrow because I have an emergency. It's no problem at all. You know, and I think that it's just the concern that they will become so engrossed with, you know, whatever the other business, the business is, that they'll forget about ministry. That's really what I think of when people, you know, question.
You know what's crazy about that? And I want to jump in before you, Defoe. What's crazy about that, and I've seen that premise and I've heard that premise, is that while that could be a perspective about a pastor, we are asking our members to do that very thing.
Flip,
you have a full-time job, you have responsibilities, you have things you need to handle, and you have your family, and we're still asking you
to do full-time ministry.
To do full-time ministry in the church for no, not even recognition or thank you, just to do it as your reasonable service. And it's amazing how we can kind of flip that Rubik's Cube around and find it acceptable for our members who have full lives But then when it comes down to our leadership, and we got to be very careful, because some things are acceptable and some things aren't. Like we celebrate certain, like if I was a full-time pastor and a itinerant preacher, if I made my side money by going from church to church preaching, nobody would say anything about it. But that is an enterprise.
You know, one time somebody done made me mad. Let me tell you what happened. Man, listen.
Here we go.
I went to detail a friend's car, and her uncle was going in the house, out of the house, and he says to her, not to me. I mean, I'm right there. You could have asked me. He says to her, "Oh, when does the pastor have time to detail cars? Doesn't she have work to do?" Now, let me tell you something. Listen, he passed right by me and said hello, but he didn't have the nerves to say it to me. He said it behind my back, which made me a little upset. But unbeknownst to his tail, I wasn't even charging her. I have a little rule that whenever someone has a baby, I detail their car for free as a gift. Now, had he asked me, he would have known that the pastor showed up for ministry on this day using her business for ministry, but you didn't ask me. Just judge me. You just figured, oh, she's shoving church work to the side. And what people don't realize is when they're in their bed asleep, the pastor is not always asleep. We are up taking your calls. We are up studying. We are up doing work. So however I manage my 24 is up to Novella. As long as I get the work done for the Lord, that's it. And that detail was free, and he still had something negative to say. That's why listen. Y'all don't know this side of me. Let me stop talking.
Again, I'm disappointed that you have to defend yourself.
Thank you.
Well, technically, Novella, you don't have to defend yourself. You could tell people to just mind their business. And maybe perhaps Novella, see, I used to be Novella's pastor a long time ago, right? So I got a little couple of years on you, right, Novella?
Yes.
When I first started, I would have cared about what people thought about their expectations of how I do my job, right?
Sure.
But after a while, there became a time where I realized even if I was sitting on the couch even if I was sitting on the couch doing nothing,
Yes.
there is a ministry of rest that we don't get. So even if I was spending my time to rest, I don't owe you 24/7.
Yes.
Right. Yes, a pastoral calling is a calling. However, it's also a job. No one is required to work their job 24/7.
Correct.
So what I do at the time outside of that is my personal business.
That's right.
Now, Novella, luckily for us, we work in a context where no one's going to ask us this question, right?
No.
However, there are people that do deal with this because, and I think the reason they don't ask us this question because the job is done, the responsibilities are handled, but also there's also a general awareness that for those of us in this generation, you're not going to make demands of me and then not pay me enough to meet the demands that you make of me. We live in Maryland right now. There are houses selling. If you want a house in Maryland now, how much a house in Maryland costs now?
My Lord.
You do not make 3%. You do not make 300. The house is more than 300% of your salary. You literally can't buy one. We're reaching the point now where ministry is going to have to be bivocational in order for people to survive. Why? Because the church, as it's structured now, cannot handle to pay fair, livable wages. It used to be. I'm sure when your father was in ministry, if they decided your family could have lived off your father's salary in the 80s, in the 90s, that is far gone, a far distant memory now. And so one of the things that I do when I talk with some of my colleagues, some of the younger guys, what else can you do to supplement this that can be a companion to your ministry? Or even if it's not a companion to your ministry, how can you add chaplaincy? How can you add counseling? How can you add something to serve other people so that you are not a beggar? So that you are not tied to someone's expectations to the point that your family cannot eat.
Mercy.
if someone decides that you're going to be on the wrong side of their impression of you or the wrong side of their opinion. This is a dog eat dog world in the church. Okay, let's just be honest. One day they're going to come for Defoe and say, Defoe, I remember what you did, and I'm going to come out and I'm going to attack you. I'm going to get you. And you know what I'm going to say? By all means, I don't need you anyway. I work this job because I'm called to it, not because I need it.
Can I start trouble for a second?
Hold on, before you start trouble, let me insert
trouble already.
I'm ready. I'm ready for the trouble. So if I was in, just a typical job, and before I get hired, I tell them, yeah, I'm interested in working here, but I also run a full-time business, and I will still make sure to dedicate myself to this job that I'm applying to. I am a threat to the business.
You mean job like pastor job or just job?
Yeah, just another job, non-pastoral, non-ministerial.
Sure.
Maybe it's a manager for a marketing company or something like that. And I may still be considered, but they're probably going to go with the candidate who is saying, I am going to be open and available fully for this opportunity. Conflicts of interest won't be there, or whatever the case is. There's more liability to hiring me because on my resume it says I am currently self-employed. I'm currently running something. A few questions will come up. Why do you need us? Or he might be poaching for, whatever the case is. It's a threat. The reason why it's a threat is because that job is, for all intents and purposes, an established institution, an established corporation that has particular rules and structures in place so that people like me can't come in and double dip. So to answer the question, should pastors be limited to the income that they have? Yes. If you sign up to be a pastor in that institution. Now, here's the thing. We can't get upset if the institution says, well, you know what? You can't moonlight, or you can do this, but you can't do that. Because at the end of the day, I go back to, we have institutionalized this whole thing. And so it's going to operate and run like an institution. But here's the thing. People that come in, like you, Novella, people that come in, like Pierre before he exited. Is that a way to say it? Exit? I don't know.
That's fine.
But it's considered a threat because you, in a sense, are this budding startup that could be siphoning people. Maybe not, but this is how they see it, which is so unfortunate. Siphoning people away from their own business.
I think it depends.
It does.
Right.
It does depend.
It depends. Now, I have never had to deal with the part of, Pastor, you cannot do this. No, they have never said that to me. No one at my church has, my senior has it, and the conference has it. And many of them are quite aware that this is my little enjoyment, my little side something. I think that it depends on how we manage our time. I think David said it quite well. The word produce. Are you producing? And if you produce, there's no reason for anybody to wonder about you. Because if you're producing, there's no question to be asked. I think the problem comes in when stuff starts to fizzle down, people are leaving and complaining, like legitimately complaining, things aren't producing. Right? Then they're like, listen, are you okay? I think that's when an issue would come up. I agree with David on that.
Yeah. Hold on. Wait. So let me finish the thought though, because you make a great point. The challenge is with other decentralized models, like ride sharing models, like Lyft or Uber, and I probably might bring this up again. They don't care what you're doing as long as you got a car, which they don't own. You know how to drive, which, they got a whole process for that. The only thing that they own is the technology. You can do everything else if you want to. There are people who are making tons of money driving, not because of their driving, but because they're actually mentoring and putting in courses and stuff. That's a whole nother situation. But what I'm saying is this, the model is different. So you being an entrepreneur on top of being a Lyft driver, on top of doing some kind of gig sharing thing, whatever the case is, isn't a threat to their technology or to their institution. And I think that's where we're missing this point is we have structured this thing where people who are entrepreneurial minded, who also choose to be pastors or are pastors and just are entrepreneurial minded, it becomes a threat, and it shouldn't be. Hence, you saying, Rob, it's disappointing that you have to even say what you said, Novella, because our system is jacked up.
I'm with you, Chris, and I think I'm gonna build on what you're saying and add the trouble question here, right? So first of all, I want to address Novella. Part of I want to coach you for a second. Part of the reason that they're not bothering you is because you just refer to what you do as your little side hustle, right? The way that you refer to, they don't see it as a threat. They don't see it as something else, so they're not gonna bother you about that, right? The moment that you say, listen, I see this as a big service where I can mentor people, where I can do things, and I'm going to grow this and I'm going to scale it. Right? We're in some different waters there. So here's the question.
I don't know, man. I don't know because Dave said it. Are you producing?
Well, okay.
Yeah, but we downplay all the time. If we go into a business, I downplay all the time. Like, I'm just doing something on the side, but it's not going to threaten the actual.
Well, they've said, are you producing? But we're still in theoretical waters there yet. The moment, if you were to scale, right, whether you were producing or not, now it looks like there's a threat to competition, your time. Right. And so because you haven't decided to pursue it in that way yet, it's not a threat. So they can say whatever they want to say. Right. So I don't want, let me get to where I want to get to, though. Here it is. What if pastoring wasn't a job? What if it was never meant to be a job? And what if we would be, we've gotten away from training and building lay pastors, right? And lay pastors typically are not pastors that are full-time in ministry, but they fulfill a specific ministerial objective and are used for that. And these pastors, they pastor a part of the community that they're in, but they have their other jobs or their businesses, et cetera, right? And part of the problem here is that some pastors that are hired by a conference should be lay pastors, right? So that they can do the other things that they should be doing. Because I'm a firm believer of if there's something that's bothering your heart, if there's something that's on your spirit to build and you constantly are prompted about that thing and you can't pay attention, that you're constantly drawn to that thing, then there's something about God's gifting inside of that thing. Granted, it's something that is serving community. I'm not talking about addictions and those types of things, right? Yeah. So I think we have boxed in pastoring to look a certain way, and therefore we feel like we need to justify and put rules in place to keep it that way.
So that's why it's interesting when you talked about pastoring looking a certain way.
Yeah.
When I think about teaching a detailing class, it makes sense to me that whatever my gift is a part of ministry. So even though I said little, it's only little because it's small right now. But what happens one day when I open a detail shop? This gives me the opportunity to hire some of the kids from the church and to hire some of the people from the community center. In my mind, if a minister has a gift, it only adds to the ministry in the church if they choose to go that route, which they should. So in my mind, that's how it all booms together. And even though I know what you're saying, Rob, is absolutely true, I think sometimes my brain just sticks with, no, but it could all work out fine if. But I understand. I do.
Yeah.
I think there's a misnomer that has to be corrected also. Yeah. The church does not have a policy against pastors having another job. The church has policies against pastors having other jobs at other churches that conflict with the job that they've currently been called to. Mm-hmm. It's a myth in the Black church. It's a Black church myth that the pastor must be owned by the church.
Yep.
Okay. That's not the context in other spaces, in other spheres. And it's an Adventist church myth. It's an Adventist church thing, right? Yeah. The truth of the matter is my ability to own and run a business helps the church because I learn outside what to then come in here to what I can then do here, right? Mm-hmm. The idea that I am able to use my idle time with industry as opposed to getting into trouble, because there could be some idle time sometimes too. Yes, there's a lot of work, but there's also a good amount of idle time.
Yeah.
Well, don't muzzle the ox while it treadeth the corn. While I'm there to work, I can work. I can do more than one thing at a time. This is 2020. You could pick up the phone. Right now, we're doing virtual visits. Now, we're doing Yo, listen. The most important thing as we talk about entrepreneurship, the most important thing specifically for pastors, those that work in the religious space, to understand is that God has called you to do this particular work. It is your calling. He didn't say, this is all that you can do, right? His disciples still went out and fished. His disciples still went out and were industrious. Yes. I tell people all the time, I'm doing what God, and this is where me and Pierre, we had this conversation when Pierre exited stage left or right, whichever one. I said we had this conversation. I can leave. I don't like my job sometimes, and I want to leave many times, but I believe that God allows me to do what I want to do because I'm doing what he's called me to do. So as long as I stay remaining in what I'm called to do, I believe he opens up for the other things that I touch to actually have success. So I'm going to leave it there because I don't want to lose my job.
And I think when we talk about even the context of calling for ministers, right? And we had this conversation before, Defoe, when we talk about the calling of a minister. What's a minister called to? So when a minister transitions from a church leadership position, a congregational leadership position, to an administrative position, there is never any question about that minister's calling, even if the administrative position that they are transitioned to has nothing to do with their gifting. They have become Sabbath school leader. They become children's ministry director. They've become whatever.
If you mention my department, I'm going to come through this computer.
It's not a lot. We never question whether or not that's in alignment with their calling, because they're still, as Chris was alluding to before, still within the institutionalization of the construct. And we know as laity, we know as pastors, that individual should not be in that role. But because it's still under the umbrella, we clap because they're still in their calling. The minister realizes my ministry context is beyond pulpit and not administrative for church. It is a different spot. And we say, have you left your calling?
You know, I would love to see what the gifts are of ministers beyond what they learned at school, right? Like, seminary, theology, you know what I'm saying? So I really love this because, for example, Pierre, he has all of these amazing gifts in teaching and leadership, et cetera, et cetera. And why is it that Pierre isn't hired by a conference, union, or something to do what he does in the church, right? Because why can't you just be a minister of X, Y, and Z? Being a pastor isn't simply, I'm at the desk, at the pulpit, I go and visit Aunt Mary and all those other people, yes, that's a part of it. But why can't it be all of it? Why can't it be Dave Defoe's counseling? Why can't it be my detailing? Why can't it be Pierre's, technology and podcasting and life? We have a pastor who's a nurse, man, who's what is it? Psych nurse?
Psychiatric nurse. Yeah. I tried to get him to work for me. He won't come.
Listen, you know what I mean? Like, I think he's like 50-50 or something, like part-time or whatever the case may be, I think. But the point is, why can't we bring the gifts that God has given us to that church?
Because we run our church like a business. We run it like a business, and it's easier to contract work in-house than it is to hire a consultant. Listen, if there's work, listen, well, no, like a poor business. What I'm saying is, it's poorly done. Yeah. Okay. Because there's a lot of work just from a standpoint of.
It's mad.
Listen, listen, throw the whole church away. Like, when I say church, I'm talking about an institution. The problem is there are gifts that are on the outside, but if I'm a business and I know that there are probably people who can do it, I would rather upskill them or see if they can do the job than bring in a consultant as a poor business. as a poor business. That's what I would do instead of putting in resources and investing a third party, a consultant from the outside to come in and to tell me what to do. I think I could save money and still hold on to my authority by managing the people that are inside. We're trying to run this thing, like the business that we, for whatever stupid reason, we decided to try to run it as, and it wasn't supposed to be that way. So pastors are still pastors because they don't know what their real gifts are. They don't know who they are. So they're going to stay being pastors. They're going to stay being miserable.
They are.
You just said the magic words, though. Power and authority. Right?
We sitting too close to each other. We got to back up. We sitting.
Yeah.
I'm gonna black myself out so I can't be a part of it.
So you can't get in trouble, right?
Yeah. The way my bank is set up.
So here's what happens. Somebody in the comments said, why can't we have, when you were talking about why can't we have Dave Defoe doing this? Why can't we have Novella doing this? Somebody in the comments says, because they can't afford him. And since they can't afford him, they guilt him into a missionary salary. Right? So
yeah, that's Jason. Yeah.
That's the church we want to be in.
Here's the deal. They don't need to afford him. If you allow him to do what he's gifted to do, then the income will come and he can be a resource to the kingdom in a different way, right? But here's the issue.
Oh, here we go.
How do we administrate?
Come on.
How do we administrate and control pastors who are making more than you in their businesses and you are quote unquote higher on the totem pole? So are we getting in trouble yet?
So Novella, let me tell you some real life stories. I worked in one place, and in the one place that I worked, I went to an administrator and I said, listen, I'm been in conversations with my colleagues in other conferences, and one of my colleagues just got a job as a pastor for special projects. Pastored a small church, and then he went from church to church training on a software or evangelism methodology. Something like that. And I said, hey, I'm willing to, be the pastor for special projects. I'll keep, this small church and still travel and train and do that. And the administrator came back to me and said, I think that's an excellent idea. I think that's an amazing job, amazing opportunity. But explain to me how I'm going to tell your more senior colleagues that I picked you and not them.
What? Sorry, I was so excited. You should have. I was about to, and then you got here, and I'm down again.
I went back a couple of maybe a year later. I said, hey, I know you're doing this thing with interns and mentoring. I can help jumpstart that mentoring program. I can align it and get it all together and get it running. And I won't even ask for anything extra. Let me have the bandwidth to do it within where I'm pastoring. And the person said, "Oh, we already have a mentoring program that I never saw." I did the same thing recently. Hey, we have interns and some mentoring young pastors. This is kind of my lane. Let me partner with you. I don't even want to run anything. Let me partner with you. No, we already have somebody. Went up a level and said, hey, you have this position, leadership development, right? Leadership development. Like, check the resume. This is what I do. This is a upper level institutional position. And the person said, yeah, come back to me when you get your D-Min. And then maybe we can have a conversation.
I think
apparently what I offer on the menu doesn't fit.
It's a struggle to hear things like that. A friend of mine in Jamaica, I'm 35, so he's about 32, 33, maybe 34. He has been the ministerial director in that conference in Jamaica for at least 4 to 5 years. Now, I check the age. That means there are people 60 and 70 years old that he manages. Why I'm saying this is based upon what Pierre said. What I would love to see in conferences is that persons are put places because of gift and knowledge and not age. Gift and knowledge and not age. And that positions are created in order to enhance areas and enhance that conference so that it is holistic for their constituents and communities, right? There's a conference that has separated their ministerial directors. You have the one for the North, the one for the South, the one. Now you're breaking things up so things can be looked at more strategically and dealt with more on a boots on the ground type of focus. You have y'all laughing at me?
No. We
I
agree with you. We laugh.
I think that some pastors should.
Yeah.
I think that some pastors should be put in certain places because of age.
Oh, Robert.
Robert.
Can I jump in right quick? And I just want to say this, right? In order for the system to survive, not thrive. To survive, it must have mediocrity.
Oh, shoot.
If the system does not have mediocrity, it does not survive. Why? Absolutely. Because to have excellence means that you upset the system. And then the system breaks down because excellence now calls into question all of the things that we've taught, all of the things that we've believed. It takes us away from being robotic to now being creative, trailblazing, the church that God needs us to be in this time, right? Okay.
You know what I love about being a local pastor is that we can just do what we need to do and I can ignore the rest. Let me tell you, that's what I do. I'm not going to lie to you. I ain't going to lie to you.
Don't lose that, Novella.
Right.
Because the hardest thing to do is to have great ideas and it be swallowed by a sea of red tape. And then you get to the point where you ask yourself, well, what in the world am I begging you to do work for?
Yeah, I don't like these things.
I have to beg you to do work? No.
Paul was like, I'm out. I'm going to do my thing.
Yeah, I think that if people would just keep the creativity and just go for it. You know how many of those guys, some of those guys there, this is when I really get to see the minister's gifts, like at camp meeting and all that electrical, this, that, that they got to do. Listen, you know how to do something else. Why is your church not knowing that you do this? What can you do in that community? Like if there's a let's say they owned the building next door to the church or down the street from the church. Well, you're an electrician because you do all that work at the at the conference, camp meeting. Man, y'all could rehab that thing and blah blah blah. This could be one whole big community project. All I'm wanting to see is that ministers use what they got and blow it up at the church and in the community. And that, I think that's it, man.
If they have a business next door to the church, then we can't transfer them in 5 years.
Oh, shoot.
That's a word, Robert.
Who said? Who said, Robert? Who said? That just means that I now enterprise. So I have a business where I used to be and a business where I'm going to be.
Listen, I'm with you. I'm with you.
I think that's one of the challenges as it relates to how we celebrate and elevate. I don't know who mentioned it before, but like sometimes we look at business owners in our church as the people who just didn't go to college or failed out of their job. I think it's hard for us to celebrate, elevate, or even look at it from a different perspective. If as the local church leader, I am not given the bandwidth or feel like I can't take the bandwidth to explore and to see and to do more. And I think that's sometimes we have that emphasis. Hey, bring somebody to church, bring somebody to church, bring somebody to church, because that's the only evangelistic paradigm that is permissible, as opposed to let's maximize where you are. And maximizing where you are in your neighborhood, in your locale, with your enterprise may mean that the person never comes in the church building, but they're still connected to the church because you are the church.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Being a local pastor is just one of them things. I think Dave would feel this because I find that you love pastoring churches.
Yeah.
And because you have that heart, like, I don't know, it to be true. Anyway, there's something about being a local pastor. When you just be you, when you're just you. I remember doing a funeral one time. I don't even think I was the person who actually, I wasn't officiating this funeral. I was there and I might have said one or two words, maybe. And I went, this was a couple years ago. I went through the drive-through to get a little dinner. And the young man in the window said, hey, you the pastor? I said, yeah. I said, where do we know each other from? He said, yeah, you at the funeral. Man, I opened my box. You know how much extra food that boy put in my box?
Extra box.
I said, thanks, man. Because the pastor made an impact, a presence was felt. All I'm saying is use your natural self, whether it's at the funeral, whether it's detailing, whether it's teaching somebody some electrical stuff, some woodworking. One of the pastors in the conference, I saw his post. He's good at woodworking. So they made like beds for a shelter. Right? Now you tell me somebody not gonna remember him when he steps out in the road. That's the bed man. That's the woodworking guy. That's
the contemporary ministry must be different. And it must be beyond the pulpit. It needs to be beyond the hospital. It needs to be beyond all these places where we traditionally see pastors. It has to be, it has to be ministry in the marketplace. It has to be ministry where the people are. And if the people aren't coming into the church, we need pastors of a variety of talents, giftings, abilities, so that we can meet the people where they are. Right. But the thing is, we so much want to fit everybody into a mold so that they can be robotic and controlled and boxed in. Right. When ministry, effective ministry always happens outside of the box. But we can't handle outside of the box, because all we know and all we have rules for is the box. So you better get back in the box, because we don't have a rule for outside of the box. Well, it's going to take some real, if this is the church that God's really going to come back for, if this is the church that God is really going to allow to finish the work of the gospel, we've got to change. We can't do the same things. It can't be this same way. And so there's some of us who no matter how many times I say I'm done with this, I'm quitting, I'm going to stay, because I'm going to continue to start trouble until we figure out that it's changed, until we figure out that we can categorically change stuff. Because
I think it's really hard to disciple people on how to have impact as a church leader. I think not impossible, but I think it's difficult as the world changes to disciple people on how to have impact in a world or in a marketplace where they primarily live, if I don't know anything about that world.
That
world, you come into my world, my space 2 or 3 times a week as a pastor for prayer or whatever, and you spend a lot of time in the world which you work, and you're coming to me for guidance or perspective, discernment on how to navigate that world and how to be a great disciple in that space. But if I don't know anything about that space, part of my perspective is going to be limited in what I pass on to you.
Yeah, and I think we have boxed in, so to speak, Jesus's analogy of new wine and old skins. Because we have bottlenecked the spiritual gifts in the church into this old skin construct, it's going to burst. And here's the challenge. Jesus never said to throw away the old skin. And so, Novello, the vision that you had, it really felt like the I Have a Dream speech. And I was like, it may not fit into the old wineskin. And I think that what we're trying to do, and this is where we're messing up. What we're trying to do is we're trying to activate, we're trying to reawaken, we're trying to get people to do it in a space that is not designed to hold. It will collapse. It will burst. And I think that it's the same thing, like old cloth, and you put the new fabric on, it's going to tear away at it. And it's not because there are people that are divisive. It's not because there are people who are trying to deconstruct things maliciously. It just doesn't work. Defoe talked about red tape. It's just not going to work. Now, the question is, am I being a pessimist or defeatist because I'm saying, well, it's just not, you just get the right person? No, I'm not, because we have hundreds of years of case studies to prove that when it doesn't work here and somebody does it somewhere else, one of two things happen. They either try to shut it down, or they get so much publicity from the outside world that they come and start to, oh, we know him. Oh, we know her. Yeah, they used to. So my whole thing is, it's the whole, Jesus never said to throw away. And I know I said that in jest, like, yo, just throw the whole thing away. No,
Yeah.
But stop trying to make it, unless that's your calling. Listen, there's some people your calling is to stay in it because there are only certain things that can be done after you've spent decades sometimes to start to change, right? To do some things.
Right.
Cool. That might be your calling. But for others, start your stuff and stop trying to wrestle with it. Like, there's so much gifting that can blow up outside of that. People that you can build, that you can disciple, that you can bring to Christ outside of trying to wrestle with the system. We wrestling with the system too much.
Yeah.
And that's
I want to, and I'm not the theological one in the group, so I may be a little bit wrong in how I say this or how I interpret this, but I want to ask the question: if we look at Jesus as the model for pastoring and ministry, is there a record of Jesus ever baptizing anybody in the Bible? All right. Jesus was primarily a teacher.
His disciples did it.
And he was primarily a teacher, and he was also one who taught people the gifts of discipleship, right? And taught them how to gain other disciples. So if we go back to the whole lay pastor idea, is the primary role of a pastor then not as baptizer and stat getter, but as one who then disciples others who can then disciple others? And I feel like we've lost some of that along the way. We've defined it in such a way, and we've boxed pastors, as David was saying, into this role that has to look a certain way. And I want to challenge us to look back at the original model that Jesus gave.
In the original model, pastors don't even exist. Elders, deacons, congregational leadership. So there are roles that we've created and designed. Not that, not to say, well, because it's that way, we have to be purist and come back. But we've made a lot of these things more difficult to do because we've added extra departments, we've added extra titles. And because of that, if we're going to go straight back to early church and how they were designed, it was easy for Paul to say, yeah, that's not my lane, homie. But find a few people within the system that we have created to handle that, because this is what I do, and because we have more titles, responsibilities, and roles, not responsibilities, but roles, it's harder for people who still don't know who they really are to get caught up in the title or the role that they should be versus the calling that they truly have. And so they're doing assignments. They're doing the right work, but the wrong assignment. I think your question.
One of the challenges we also face and have to embrace and wrestle with is this. Like, a lot of us are just afraid, man. There is a security that comes from the construct. And there are many of us who have had things that we know that God has put on our heart to do. But because of a fear of maybe standing in a different position or what people will say or their opinion, we back down.
Yeah.
The difference, though, for an entrepreneur is that they use that fear as a springboard. And I want us to chat a little. I know we're coming up on the 90-minute mark in this conversation, but I want us to chat about how we can speak to the fears that you've had as an entrepreneur, and also speak to your colleagues in ministry, whatever that looks like, your colleagues in ministry who may be having similar fears, and how you would encourage them.
So I'll go first. So I'm gonna be vulnerable in this space here, right? In January, I had COVID, right? Haven't told nobody. Not many people know. Never posted on Facebook. I'm sitting in my basement, away from my family, away from my wife. Can't move, and I'm sitting here thinking to myself, in these 14 days, waiting to die because I'm fat, whatever, waiting to die, not knowing what's going to happen. I think to myself, the only thing I'm going to leave my family is a life insurance policy. I won't leave them with anything else. Some memories, some pictures, life insurance, and at least I have that. But I started to ask myself the things that I've always told myself I was afraid of. What's the risk that I would take if I end up the same place anyway?
Wow.
When we had our mastermind group, if 2 years ago, when I was talking the foolishness that I was talking, if I had done what I'm now doing, I would be in a much better place. But I realized here I am not knowing whether I'm going to live or die. So I had it bad, not knowing if I had to live or die. And I'm saying to myself, you know what? If I do it and fail, I end up in the same place anyway. But one thing I'm not going to do anymore is I'm not going to one day meet my deathbed and realize I didn't try. There's going to be no more I should have's in the tank for me. So the fear that I had was done away with having the coronavirus and sitting there not knowing what the heck was going to happen to me, right? So we scaled the business then. When I had Corona at the start of January, I had 2 therapists that worked for me, right? In the time since then, we've now built the largest group practice in this area, right? Okay, because the fear of failure is not the same. Failing to me was being in that basement, not knowing if I closed my eyes and went to sleep, my family, what in the world would they do? They'd throw me a good funeral, maybe, coronavirus, I probably wouldn't get that either. But what else would they have? And it was that removed the fear from me. And so I don't know what the catalyst is going to be for some people. Maybe it's I'm dealing with maybe I'll fail. Maybe it's I don't know if this is a good idea. There's many ways you can try it and fail and realize what doesn't work, but to not do anything, nah. Don't just do nothing. Do something. Give it a shot. Try it. Yeah. I can't believe I told you all that.
Thank you for sharing.
Much needed.
Yeah. I don't know what to say about the fear. I mean, I would say in my humanness, I still have fear.
Yeah.
Right. It's just that my why is stronger than my fear at this point. I think about myself as Jonah. God said do something and Jonah ran away and then he followed him with the storm anyway. Yeah. Right. So my story, my short story is that I was a teacher and I knew that I needed to be doing a business in some way. I started a business while I was teaching and did that, but didn't really do what it took to make that business bigger. I could hear God saying certain things. I started a second business and didn't push because I had the safety net of my business. Now, please, those people that are working, that are bivocational, please don't think I'm coming for you. I'm talking about my circumstance. I was teaching and I moved from the state of Massachusetts to Maryland. And I was teaching online for this university. And we moved and we thought that my salary was X and my wife's increase in salary was X and it was going to be cool. 10 days after we moved here, I lost my job. I did what everybody else does. I sent out resumes. I went on Monster. I went on Simply Hired, Indeed. And here's what God did. Normally, you send out resumes and you get responses and you go on interviews and you get rejected. I got not one response. For 6 months, I got not one response. 3 kids under the age of 5, moved them 400 miles away from where we were, not one response. And so I had to contribute and support my family. I had to start doing something, right? So my fear at that point wasn't about entrepreneurship. My fear wasn't about failing at entrepreneurship. My fear was failing as a dad and a husband. And so I needed to switch and fail that. So my why is, right, making sure that I serve God, making sure that I provide for my family, make sure, and it's on my wall here. There are 5 things: making sure that I serve God, protecting my family, providing for my family, protecting my wife, building a legacy, and helping my parents. Right? Those are 5 whys that sit on my wall. And if you want to move past your fear, then you've got to define why. What is your why behind doing all of this stuff? Because if your why is not strong enough, you won't be around long enough.
Facts. Jeez.
Facts.
Mine might be a little different than the gentleman. As a lady, mine is gonna maybe come off a little bit different, but I'll try my best to explain it. If you look around, you don't see female detailers owning businesses much at all. And it was something I started, like I told you, in undergrad, just to make a little change. And then it just became something I really liked. And I started a business. And the feeling of not wanting to be misunderstood as a detailer started to drift in my head. And I didn't want to show up, for a job and somebody misunderstand me, as a lady. But what I did was I thought about a few things. And I said, this is your gift. That's number 1. And you must maximize your gift. We know that from the Bible. That's just human nature. We must maximize your gift. And number 2, because you're the business owner, you get to control what this looks like. So you control what your logo looks like. If you go to my Instagram page, you'll see that this logo looks very gentle and soft, right? Because I didn't want to come across hard and, more on the masculine side, which is what detailing might reflect. You control your logo. You control the name of it. You control, and this is something I want to teach the young people, especially, how you show up. What is your uniform when you go to work? So I have my uniform shirt and I have my logo across the back of the shirt, and I wear certain shoes and certain pants and stuff so that I'm showing up the way that I want to be received. I will always be received as a professional, but I honestly also wanted to be received as a lady because it's a very male dominant business. And I didn't want to come across hard and, I didn't want that. And so that really sat on my brain for a little bit, but not long enough to discourage me. It sat on my brain just a little bit, but caused me to think of the fact that as the owner, you control those parts.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really good.
So Chris, you're gonna have to close today because I'm gonna tell these two spots real quick. So one is the story of how I ended up writing my first book. I've shared the story before when we've done.
No, you need to end. You need to end with that. You need to end with that. We ain't.
You end.
Can't
You end. Yep, I know. So I'm pastoring a 3-church district in Kentucky. I'm in the space where the suggested demand for me, because I have one church that's 1 hour and 20 minutes from my house, the other is 2.5 hours. The suggested demand for me was that I run prayer meetings and everything in my church, one on Tuesday, one on Wednesday, one on Thursday. So one in my local area, one drive 1 hour and 15, one drive 2.5 hours. All of this, trying to figure out how this works. And I had reached the limit of just my budget and salary driving from church to church. Reached the end of it. And I remember one time just being broke, like flat broke, like just at the bottom. And going into the refrigerator, it's like, yo, okay, we about to make some lunches for the kids tomorrow for school, and there's literally nothing there. Like, it's not there. And I'm just like frustrated, embarrassed. I cry a little bit. And I remember in that moment, God saying to me, yeah, I know this doesn't feel good, but also I know there's something I told you to do.
Wow.
So we're wrestling, got some money to get through that situation. I'm wrestling with this book project that I'm frustrated about writing. And God is like, I told you to finish this thing. As soon as I finished it, as soon as it was done, crazy things started happening. Crazy opportunities started happening. I remember maybe about 6 months later, I'm hosting a conference based on the book, a leadership conference in the city of Bowling Green, Kentucky. And we had about 40 something people there from the city, our first ever event. And I'm super excited about it. A half-day event. I remember at the end of that event, somebody from the community who worked at a nonprofit in the community has tears in his eyes. And he said, we need more people like you in places like this, not just in the church.
Wow.
I have enough stories to fill a book. But fast forward, I'll share just one more. Fast forward, a couple of years later, I'm in Houston. Am I in Houston? Yeah, I'm in Houston. And I'm giving a talk on leadership at this conference. It's a conference for people who work in the court system. And I'm just talking about leadership and life balance. And midway through, we take a short break, and this lady walks up to me. She's a judge in Cleveland. She's a judge in Cleveland. She walked up to me midway and she said, hey, can I talk to you? And I said, yeah, you can talk to me. She said, I know this is going to sound crazy, but God told me to come to this legal conference for whatever. And I was like, all right, tell me more about that. She said, a couple of weeks ago, I lost my mom. And it's one of the most devastating things that ever happened to me. I lost my mom. I was spiraling. I couldn't really do my job. I'm a judge. I live in Cleveland. And this was up on the calendar. And I felt like I heard God say, come anyway. I wrestled back and forth. I bought the ticket at the last minute. I registered for the event the last minute. There are about 7,000 people at this event, multi-day conference. And she said, once you started talking about leadership and life balance, I heard God say, this is exactly what you need to hear at this point in your life. And she could not make it through the first half of the session because she said, it seemed like everything that you were saying was speaking to where I was. She finishes, we go through the second half of the session, we exchange cards to keep in contact. And God said in that moment, hey, remember a couple of years ago when you didn't want to write that book and you didn't have any food and you was all frustrated? I was preparing you for moments like this.
Wow.
Do what I tell you to do.
Yeah.
And every time I take a contract, every time I accept an engagement, every time there's a fear, the possibility that I may say the wrong thing for a person at a critical point in their life. But then I'm reminded I'm on assignment.
That's deep.
That's it.
That's it.
I think we've heard enough stories. I'm gonna just go ahead and wrap this thing up.
No, you don't get away without talking about your.
Shut up here. So even what I just said is a case in point of what I'm going to talk about. This is specifically for people who you have the potential, and you might even be sitting next to people who have affirmed it. But the reason why you haven't crossed over is because the assignment, the gift, or whatever it is God has placed in you speaks directly to your most vulnerable past. And that's my story. I remember we were at the conference 4 years ago, and this is where I met Rob. This is where we connected with Defoe. This is where Pierre, I think we hadn't seen each other for a minute too. And I think we were all in the table. Defoe opens up my little black book. You don't remember this. And he was like, this is you, like, you did this? You wrote this up? And this is just notes, y'all. I'm just doodling stuff. He's like, bro, you're a genius. And I'm like, my message to those who people have told you that probably all your life. The first thing is you have to embrace and accept it. It took me a while to accept the fact that I think differently. I mean, everyone thinks differently, but to embrace that what people have told me is the truth. So I had to change my own personal story about myself. The second thing, though, is some of us are in a pre-order phase. Listen, Defoe was one of the first ones to pre-order the book that never came out 4 years ago. And I had to, hold on, don't say nothing, Defoe, shut up. And I had to refund his money and other people too, because I'm like, I'm not going to do this, because what I had to write spoke directly to the pain that God turned into something that was going to bless other people. But by doing that, a few things happened. I have to speak about myself. I have to speak on the narratives of other people. And that's another thing too. Some of us, we know if we start to build this thing, it starts to apologetically or unapologetically step on the toes of people that you ain't really, they may not be ready to come out and share their part or whatever it is. And so you try to respect as much as you can their time and their narrative. But it does a few things, and it puts you in a vulnerable place where people may say, but ain't that the person that used to? 3 days ago, I actually launched my course, not pre-order, like launch. Got out of the fear and said, okay, you know what? I just need to do it. Went ahead and did it. And then the next day, that was July 1st. The next day, I encountered a marketing specialist who was not trying to sell me. He was just a direct referral. He was like, yo, y'all need to connect. It's cool, dude. Da, 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 da. And he says, yeah, how much is your course? I said, $47. He said, that's fear talking. We're talking about phases, y'all. So the first thing was like, I don't really want to do it. But then it's like, okay, I'm going to do it, but I'm going to put it on pre-order. So I need validation to see whether or not people actually want it. And if they do, I'll release it. And God is like, release it regardless. I've already given it to you. Why are you waiting for people to say they're going to have it when it's something that people already need? So now I'm in the phase where I release the thing. So we're using my product as your gift. All right. Well, that's what we're doing. We're creating this analogy. So now I release the thing. I put it in public, but my integrity cheapens it. I don't think it's as valuable. He was like, yeah, this is going to be at least $3,000. I'm like, hold on. He spent the last hour and a half just speaking over my life. And it took a whole hour and a half for me to realize, yeah, I am scared, because I thought about all of that, the pricing and all of that before, and I just released it. How is that going to make me seem, I got one price now and then I'm changing the price because, credibility. And he's like, listen, people who already saw it, seen it one time and they're not looking back at it. It's not as big as you think it is, bro. It's like, relax. And I'm saying all of that to say that at every stage of your life where you're thinking that, man, I don't know, I may not be ready, or I'm ready, but I'm just going to do a little bit here and a little bit there. And there is always going to be there's always going to be somebody or an opportunity that's going to challenge you. And you have to, well, you don't have to, but you should say yes. There are going to be people who are going to support you. There are going to be opportunities that you should say yes to that's going to open up something else that you have no idea is going to just manifest because of you saying yes. And here's the other thing. You can probably experience success in other spaces, but it's still not the thing that God wants you to do. So some of us are multi-potentialites, but we're not we got the potential, but we haven't done anything with it. Same thing we talked about last night. The fig tree has leaves, beautiful leaves, but there's no fruit on it. And so for me, my story is now just releasing the thing. And I have, and aligning my integrity with the value that God has given. So you got to stand behind the fact that God has given you a gift and just walk in it. That's my story. That's one of my stories. And I hope that blesses somebody.
Speaking of walking in it, we are going to walk in the gifts that God has given us as it relates to entrepreneurship by ending with telling people one more time about what you do. You dropped your links in the chat. I'm going to bring those links up as you talk. Let's just take a little bit of time as we're ending to talk about your business. Defoe, because it's the link that I have at the top. So I'm gonna start with that.
No problem, man. I run a mental health agency called Imar Counseling Services. So that's what I currently am doing. We have about 14 clinicians that see people for a range of mental health concerns. And I'm also working on the Imar Center for Grief and Loss, which will take the uniqueness of the African American and Black grieving experience and try to utilize mechanisms in our own community to help people heal from grief. So those two things. Imar Counseling is my business, and then the Imar Center for Grief and Loss is the nonprofit.
Awesome. Pastor Smith?
Sure. So I have Deep Style Auto Detailing, and I specialize in interior detailing. I do some exterior every now and again, but I prefer interior. Yeah, I am on Instagram, Facebook as well, but I utilize Instagram the most, so I can be found there. And we'll travel to you. And also starting up the mentoring aspect of this detailing next weekend.
Remind us, Pastor Smith, where you are geographically, because we got people who, like all across the country who hang out with us. So you
sure. DMV. Right. So DC, Maryland, and say Northern Virginia.
All right. RK3.
Thank you so much.
Hey, yeah, I'm a speaker, trainer, workshop facilitator. My speaker website is robertkennedy3.com. What I do is I work with organizational leaders who need to deliver critical messages, showing them how to do that with confidence, showing them how to do that powerfully. And I also work with coaches and small business owners who need to create greater visibility, and I help them do that through the art of storytelling. So our B2B corporate training site is kineticcommunications.com. And the community site for those who are small business owners and coaches, consultants is storytellersgrowthlab.com.
You got all these links, man. I'm trying to.
He's serial over there, man. Serial entrepreneur.
Links.
Well, listen, here's the deal. I think Chris mentioned earlier about freelancers, and I learned not early enough, but not too long ago, that there is the freelance mindset. And I learned that I also had to transition from the business owner mindset to the CEO mindset. And one of what that means is that instead of being in the space where I'm doing everything and I'm the principal and I need to be in a space where I have the bird's eye view. I see the larger vision and I can manage multiple things, or I just kind of manage the resources to make those different things happen. So that's what I'm learning, man.
I love it.
Pete, they see us every week. So
nope.
Don't do that.
Let's go. Let's go. Come on. It's almost 2 hours. We need to end the show. Stop playing.
Okay. So well, if we gonna go there, then hold on. Let me get you the
drop the reel. You playing?
Drop that one.
Okay.
All right, guys. So I'm a storytelling strategist and UX designer. So long story short, even though I focus in healthcare when it comes to designing messaging, and my messaging, I'm talking about business stories, brand messages, proposition statements, why you do what you do, but saying it in a very compelling way. It works for individuals too. So you may know what your why is, but if you have a hard time telling it to other people. So I help people to say it in a concise, persuasive, and memorable way. And stories typically help. And then the other side is designing user experiences. So that's like digital space, mobile applications, websites. You may have a great brand, but the buttons and the user flow of how to even get to your stuff just sucks, which affects your brand. So that's what I do, kind of help people to help your customers. Think about your customers first. That's what user experience is about. Don't build something until you actually know what they need, what they want, what's painful to them, what they desire, and then also helping you to message it properly so that you can actually get people in the door. That's me.
I love it. I love it. Yeah. PierreCquin.com is my website. I work with leaders and teams to assess strengths, to build stronger organizational cultures, and to foster the relationships that lead to personal and professional transformation. If you got a whole bunch of people on your team and you're looking to maximize them, but you don't know a lot about them and you don't know how to get them to work together, I'm your guy. That's what I do. And with that, we have had a great conversation today here on Worship and Word Conversations. So here's what's so important, and this is how we close every single show. There's a conversation that you need to have with God about all the stuff that we've talked about today, about church, about religion, about your spiritual journey, about if entrepreneurship, if you feel like God is placing that on your heart. It's one thing to listen to us rant and rave and share perspectives and even cry a little bit in an hour and 45 minutes, but that cannot replace the conversation, the one-on-one conversation that you need to have with God.
Amen.
For yourself about this. So as we say and do here at the conclusion of every worship and word, go pray.
Go pray.